last night, so my smartphone outsmarted me. So my alarm didn't go off till like 15 minutes ago.
Oh,
Protein cookie, dragon energy drink, go!
amazing. All right, well, let's get started. You could have said you were struggling to cross the road. So let's give you the end of that.
Thank you.
That's all. Okay, it's great
No,
to
I'm
meet
just
you.
incompetent.
Well, thanks for coming. Thank you, Alarm System gods, for not sending us out of this room right now. We're obviously all here for the podium. Can you hear me? Irene is telling me you can't hear me. Oh, okay, speaking of the mic. I'm not a narrator, obviously. So we're here for the Podium Audio panel, and I have with me some wonderful, wonderful authors who are published by Podium. And if you're not familiar with who we are a publisher of independent sci-fi, fantasy, lit RPG, romance. You have little pamphlets on your chair which are representative of all these guys on the panel. And without more ado, let's do some introductions. So start from the end there, Craig.
Okay, I thought this was karaoke, so...
Come on.
Craig Alanson, I write mostly military sci-fi, the Explore series, but I'm now writing in either urban or contemporary fantasy. People have told me only Jim Butcher's books are called urban fantasy now, but yeah.
I hate that.
I mean, George.
Why?
Yeah.
Which part of that title? Urban fantasy, or that it's only a Jim Butcher?
Urban fantasy doesn't have to be set in the city.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I would say contemporary fantasy. We're just saying what the Grimm brothers did.
Yes.
You know, for hundreds of years.
I think that's a good decision you've made today. Contemporary fantasy. That's what we're calling it.
What do we?
Contemporary.
All right, now it's done.
Yeah.
Good. That's set.
Hey everyone, I'm Harmon Cooper. I write lots of books. With Podium, I currently have Pilgrim, Cowboy Necromancer, and War Priest, and I have so much free stuff to give away that I don't want to take on the plane back, so be sure to get it all from me afterward. Yeah, I mean like stickers, buttons, postcards, swag, too much swag. So thank you so much for coming.
Good morning, I'm Jim Butcher. I'm the author of the Dresden Files, and Podium was kind enough to let me add a microphone for a while this year, so that was a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Robert Ross, and I write urban fantasy. No, wait, contemporary fantasy. Sorry, I'm a little slow on the uptake. I also do paranormal romance and near future sci-fi, which is the book, The Paradigm 2045, which is published by Podium.
I'm Davis Ashura. I've written 11 books, I think, across 3 series. They're all sort of linked together. The Cast and the Outcast, The Chronicles of William Wilde, but if I'm known, it's for this one, Instrument of Omens, and this is the one that's through Podium. And I also own my own medical practice, which is a rare breed these days, and I'm a physician, so I kind of run a little ragged some days.
But you know how to cross the road.
I do know how to cross the road
I did
against
not know how to
traffic.
cross the road.
Get across.
So our panel is about fantasy, fandom, and storytellers. So please talk a little bit about how your fans, some who are arrayed here, fuel your passion and the continuation of your series. Starting with you, gentlemen. Craig.
Well, I mean, the fact that I have fans is just, I mean, it's me. I mean, yeah. It's astonishing. I mean, you know, people are like, oh, you got to continue this series forever. No, I have a story I wanted to tell. When the series is done, the story's over. Move on from there. And then, of course, I have the people that say, oh, I got a great idea. I'm like, don't tell me. Don't. Ideas are cheap. It's how you write it that makes a difference. I mean, in one year we had 2 movies, Armageddon and Deep Impact, both about big rocks hitting Earth. Totally different movies. Depends on how they were written. But I do love to hear from fans. And my favorite thing is when people tell me, your book got me through a really tough time in my life. Or, you know, a father and son on a road trip bond over listening to the audiobooks, because there's so much that pulls us apart. When people bond over something like that, yeah.
I'm in the same boat as him as the self-published author. Fans contact me, they send me crazy things. Recently, which was really beautiful to me, a fan contacted me from McAllen, Texas, and he sent me a picture of a toy he had made. But it didn't look like it had been 3D printed. It looked like he had you know, like gotten G.I. Joes and like pieced it together. And he's like, it's your character, Cowboy Necromancer. And I was like, wow. And so, well, the strange part is my family's from McAllen, Texas. And so I was like, wow. And so I'll send you all the swag I have. I'll send you everything. I'll send you books. Like, just, yeah, let me send it to you. And I love that kind of stuff. And it's just the connection that we can make with people is just amazing.
At times I'm a little afraid of you guys. And so I keep writing mostly because I start getting increasingly nervous as people ask me when the next book is coming out. But seriously, the greatest thing you can hear as an author, I think, really is when a fan comes up and says, your writing got me through a tough time. I've got a couple of series that are like that. You know, one that I read, one of Simon Green's that I was reading when my dad was dying, you know, and I was so grateful to him for writing that. I can never read them again. But they got me through that time, you know, and so when someone comes up to me and says, hey, your book's helped, it's like, oh, okay, awesome. I will be your mental morphine dealer. Here you go.
So really, we're all physicians.
Yeah,
More like shamans.
That's cool. It's not as cool as being accused of running a cult, but it's cool. That's the other one. This person is the high priest of a cult. It's okay. So you've converted all the masses. Yes, I have. Well done. Go in peace, child.
I guess mine's a little similar. I have a real quick example. Is I guess after my third book was written or published, I got a letter from a special operator from the United Kingdom, and he had 3 special needs kids, and his wife had left him with all 3, and he was talking about how this first book, the Paradigm book, Podium published, really was something great for him and his son, who had gotten meningitis when he was just a couple months old and lost his legs and his fingers, and he wants to be an astrophysicist. So I wrote to him, I was like, how would he like to be in the next book? So I wrote the character for him as an astrophysicist who got bionic legs. It doesn't sound as cheesy as it sounds, or it didn't turn out as cheesy. And then sent him a copy, and then his dad filmed it when he opened it. It was just so great, and so that's happened like 4 or 5 times, and not the same thing, but different people have written about their children or something, and then been able to make them characters that fit into the books, and then the parents and the kids just seem to have a really great time with it.
I can't tell.
But he's a doctor.
I have stories like that, just not as a writer.
Well played.
So you may not have a comment on fans being grateful to you, but do
Okay,
you have
so-
any tips? Oh, yeah.
So I will say one thing, that the best part of being a writer, and I was kind of laughing about the notion of having fans last year, because it seems sort of, I don't know, a little bit ridiculous and self-important. So I always say readers, because that's what I think of myself first and foremost, is I'm a reader. That's how I fell in love with books and wanted to become a writer. But when you inspire people who aren't writers to create something based on your book that's in their creative field, like music or art, and they share it with you, I think that's the most wonderful thing, to have those kind of connections. So as far as readers / fans are concerned, making those connections, having them appreciate what you do, and then going on to share their appreciation with their own creations, that's the best part of it.
And we have one such creator over there, our fabulous Skippy cosplayer calling you out. So I know we have some actual authors in the audience here, but we may have some aspiring authors too. And I'm wondering if you have any tips from your writing career that you want to share, or something that you know now that you wish you'd known then when you were getting started. Davis. Go on.
So I'll go first. So the thing about being a writer is that there's lots of ways to become a writer. There's no one true answer for anyone. And even
It's Harry.
even for me, it changes from book to book. Like the last book I wrote, I was listening to ADHD music, and it helped so well. Now I'm trying, and it's like, it doesn't help at all. And sometimes I write in verse, sometimes I write in lengths, and it's forgiving yourself and finding that path. That's the most important thing, because what works for somebody who's really good at it, or you think is really good at it, may not work for you, and that doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. So learning what's right for you at that moment would be some of the advice that I could give to somebody who's trying to become a writer.
And hydrate, right? Yeah. As a doctor.
Hydrate. Drink plenty of water for your kidney beans.
Or bourbon. Bourbon's good.
That does not work.
That's for me.
You found what works for you?
That's right. Copious amounts of bourbon.
Any other tips, Robert?
Yeah, so I would say two things. One is find the genre that speaks to you. So I started off writing high fantasy, and it was pretentious crap. I mean, it was just unreadable. And my wife is here, and she told me that. So, so find the genre that speaks to you. And then the thing that really helped me was you don't have to write linearly. Some people can do that, and then you end up, and that's great. For me, I would get the scene in my head, and I'd be, oh, that's going to be really great later, and then I would screw it up by waiting. But then I learned you just write non-linearly, and then you can stitch the story together as you need to, and then it creates kind of a cohesive whole. So.
I believe you. Wow, I couldn't do that. Oh, really? Yeah. I don't know. It seems like you have to write drafts that way. For me, I think what I wish I'd learned sooner was, the more and more as I write, the more I learn as a writer, the more I realize keeping it simple is the most advantageous thing you can do for so many reasons. So, when you're writing your scenes, when you're writing your sequels, you get done what you've got to get done, say what you've got to say, and move along. I find as I keep going, I go lighter on description than I used to. I generally tend to sprinkle in a little bit less emotion along the way, so that I save it up for critical points. So that when I do something horrible to Harry, you guys feel it too. At the end of the day, here's the other thing that I wish somebody just told me outright at the beginning. You don't have to be a sadist to be a writer. It's so helpful, because your job is essentially torturing your protagonist. That's not true, I just lied. Your real job is torturing your readers, but if you try that, you'll go to jail. So I created Harry Dresden to stand in for all of y'all. So, you're welcome.
You all, by the way, that was perfect.
One thing that I picked up from the panel yesterday that I was on that stuck with me about world building is that sometimes when you're starting out, you spend a lot of time world building because you're not writing it because you're afraid to actually write what you are planning to write. If you really like world building, to negate that, world build over a long length of time, and while you're still writing something else or doing something that adds to that. So like the new thing I'm releasing this fall, I've been world building it almost like 3 or 4 years, just off and on. Like I'll read a research book about it or something like that, and then I have all the notes, and then be willing to delete all of that once you put it in the text, because it doesn't go. It slows down the pacing. One really good book on world building is called On Writing and World Building by Timothy Hickson. I really like his stuff because he compares everything from Harry Potter to anime to anything on like world building styles and options, soft magic, hard magic, all of that. And he does it in a really concise way. So I would recommend reading those. I try to always alternate reading on writing books, and it's been one of my favorite ones, and I've read like dozens and dozens. It is called On Writing and World Building. There's 2 volumes and by Timothy Hickson. Yes, it's really good.
My best advice is write the kind of book you want to read. Otherwise, it's just not authentic. I also write in a non-linear fashion, but I write to an outline. So if I get up in the morning and I'm like, this is a scene I want to write, I know where it goes in the book. I'm inspired to write that scene that day. Also, when I write a series, I have a story arc for the entire series, for each book in it, so I know everything goes.
And you're not telling.
No.
You told me last night. Well,
Well, that's worth something. So obviously we're an audiobook publishing company. I see a couple of narrators in the background there. Guys. So, and you all, have a number of audiobooks of your books in the market. And so I'm wondering if the narrators that you've partnered with have, changed how you write your characters, or if they've surprised you in any way when you actually listen to the finished book.
First.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, I'll go first again. So my narrator is Nick Bedell, and I was lucky enough to have Nick as my narrator for everything that I've written. And the first time I heard the book, I thought, wow, that's way better than I remember. And then I've always felt like, man, I wish I could write as good as my cover art and my narrator. But, you get there, hopefully. But listening to Nick bring the characters to life, it didn't change the characters, but looking at the words, I could sometimes imagine how it would sound, and that actually changed sentence structures. Didn't change plot, didn't change story or characterization, it just changed how I structured the sentences. Because I could imagine how it would sound a lot better now that I had practice actually listening to my own books and how they sounded. So that would be the biggest change, was just feeling how the words would sound as I was writing them, or as I was doing drafts, many drafts.
Yeah, sadly I don't do drafts. I probably should, but it just doesn't work out that way.
Urban interference.
Yes, urban interference. It just fuzzes everything up. So my primary narrator is Nick Bedell as well, and he and I have been working together for almost 10 years now, and it's been just an amazing experience. So I've got to be really great friends. In fact, my family and kids are going to stay with us on 2 weeks. So I hear him in my head, and my sentence structures start to change. And he actually corrects my manuscript. And he's like, "You screwed that up," although he's super sweet, so he inserts something long and Midwestern for "you screwed that up."
He just tells me you screwed that up.
He dislikes me more.
Yes, I figured.
So, but it also kind of changes kind of the colloquialism, so there might be some more. One of my characters is Scottish, so that person one's Russian, and how that phraseology is in print might be a little different as well. So, and then I guess the last thing is that in each of my books now, I try to put one scene where I torture him. In one book, if you've ever seen White Christmas. Many people have seen White Christmas?
Yeah.
So there's the scene where the Haynes sisters are singing with each other. So I had him do a duet with himself. There's 2 women, one Scottish and one American, and that was great fun. So in each book, he's like, "What's coming? What's coming? It's coming." But he's like with Davis. He's 0.1 star better narrator than I am a writer. So I keep track of that. So I'm like, thanks, you're always better than me.
James Marsters can't say the word little. And I use it so often, and I never noticed until I saw the interview with him to talk about how he can't say that word and how much of a struggle it is. Apparently they have to have a day where he just goes through and says little a bunch in the right places because he has trouble saying it for whatever reason. So next book I promised him I'm not going to use the word little. And so I'm just going to break out my thesaurus and use every word but little and see if I can find something else in terms of
So I work with several narrators. Mikael Naramore narrates Pilgrim. McLeod Andrews narrates Cowboy Necromancer. Travis Baldry narrates War Priest. I'm also working with Daniel Wisniewski and Rebecca Woods. I've worked a lot with Jeff Hayes and Justin Thomas James. And when I pitch, if I'm going to produce the audiobook myself, I already know the narrator I want. If I work with like Podium or Blackstone or Tantor, I tell them like what style narrator I want, or if I have a person. So my new series is going to have Wayne Mitchell, because I listened to his Silver Fox and the Western Hero, and I'm like, I can write to this. And so I was a musician for a long time, and so that if I can hear someone's cadence and how they read, then I can write in a way that will sell that part of it better. And it gives me something to like listen to, like while I'm exercising. I can listen to it and then go back and write it, even though it's my own thing. It's a different story. I can tune it to that in a way. So I love working with narrators. The narrator I really want to work with is R.C. Bray, but I don't write really any genres that he does. Like, and I just love his voice, so I love working with narrators.
So my narrator is R.C.
Yeah, I know.
And he's changed the way I write for audio, which changes the way I do dialogue. And Bob's just brilliant at it. And I have changed some of the characters. Like Bob hates doing certain accents, so that I don't have characters with that accent. And I will bounce ideas off of them before I put it in the book. Like I had one where I like, Bob, can you burp the Happy Birthday song? And he's like, I never thought this day would come. He said, dude, you insult me. But in my new book, I got a talking dog. And I said, Bob, do you want to do a talking dog? He's like, I have always wanted to do a talking dog. And I hear his voice in my head because I wrote the dog says, huh? And Bob says, mm-hmm. And I'm like, that is exactly how a dog would say that word. Yeah, it's changed. Like I said, I write for audio, so I don't use dialogue tags. It's never Bob said, Joe said, but take seds off the end of it. It just makes it a better book.
So in a follow-up, Jim, you narrated your own book recently.
Yes.
Republished.
Yeah, I was very disappointed in me.
You did a great job. Stephanie, who was on our casting team, she directed you, and
Yes.
she said you were fabulous. So just talk about your decision, that decision to step behind the mic and step into James's shoes for one project.
And can you do it in your John Wayne voice?
And can you say the word little?
Well, I'm getting a little upset about this. Yeah, what I found out when I got behind the microphone is I just don't take direction well. There's a reason I'm a writer, and they keep me alone in the room most of the time. But it was seriously. I mean, you're trying to read and you're trying to put a bunch of passion into it. You're trying to do the character and get all the words pronounced correctly and make sure you enunciate absolutely everything you say. And while you're juggling, 3 or 4 mental balls, trying to get through the script, then you'll be right in the middle of somebody say, okay, do that again, but we need it with a little bit more, I don't know, or a little bit more passion, or you rushed that one, and like, we're doing an action scene here. It's faster. It has to be. Okay. I'll slow down. But it was really unusual working with somebody else. I'm so used to working by myself. I work with Ann Sowards at Penguin, and poor Ann. Mostly she's just like, okay, just do what you're going to do here. This word, maybe this is not the right word. Okay, all right, good. Yeah, and we have reached a point of balance there. But this was a whole new experience for me, working with somebody who was kind of dissecting what I was doing in real time. I'm so not used to that. I'm used to getting talked to like months later. It's like, here was a problem. Okay, I'm going to take about 2 weeks to deal with this. Okay, now I'll fix it. Like that. But when you're in real time, you got to actually deal with people, and a bit of a hermit. That was weird. I might try it again at some point, but wow. Yeah, they keep us alone for a reason.
That's good to have the backstory. Stephanie did not say anything except that you were fabulous.
Oh, she was a lot of fun, but she knew what she was doing and I didn't. It made me feel off balance.
That's good. So Craig, back to you. My next question is for you. Can you cast your mind back to when you first listened to Bob's performance in Columbus Day, and anything there that surprised you about the characters that you had invented?
I have an artificial intelligence who's an asshole. Skippy. And he did basically the voice of Fraser Crane with an English accent, which makes it even more arrogant. I gave him no direction. Honey, remember? And we're like, that is exactly what I had in mind. Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly what I pictured, but I gave him no direction. I wanted him to own that character's voice, and it was just brilliant. Yeah. And of course, I had listened to him do The Martian, the better version of the Will Wheaton. And I was like, this guy, this is the greatest audiobook of all time. And like, oh my God, Podium can get this guy to do my audiobook. And since then, Bob's been in my house and we're friends and all this, but it was just like, oh my God, if I could do that, that would be a dream.
The crazy thing, it was only 6 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So Harmon, to you. So one of the things I love getting from you is the emails with your cover art. You spend a lot of time and effort on your art. Can you talk a little bit about how that process works for you? Does it, I know you do it well in advance. I'm not going to answer the question for you. You go.
So I work with two artists right now, Daniel Kamarudin and Richard Sashagane. And all this is Daniel Kamarudin. I'm going to talk about a little bit of that, and then I have an example of working with an artist and a narrator together on something, which is I saved for this. So my mom is a folk artist, and my dad was an artist and a musician, and so I trust an artist that if I trust them, I don't really step in. I just tell them like the ingredients that I need. So I usually prepare a document. For the Pilgrim series, this is a different artist, but then Daniel took over from the third book, which is the most beautiful cover. And I'll just tell him, like, I want this guy fighting this lady or fighting this person or doing this. The background should have blood, maybe put a face in it, and just show me some examples. And then he'll spend several weeks and he'll come back with like several examples, and then we'll just kind of like, narrow down from there. But that's when you work with an artist who's good, they're expensive, but just trust them because it does actually can shape what you're putting in. Like for the newest Pilgrim, which is out in December, it'll be my 75th book, and I really wanted a crazy cover, and I told him like I want him fighting a woman who has like a bladed fan, like something out of Mortal Kombat, and you should see the cover. It's up on Amazon now, and it's amazing. He's put it on like a marble background, and if you like look at her robes, like the silk detailing and stuff, added to now when I'm putting this character in, like it's like a portion of the story. And so I really like working with him that way. So the reason I mentioned a narrator is because I published the feedback loop in 2015. I never had a cover that showed the person's face, and we were going to do a re-release. So there's 8 books. We're going to put them into 4-book omnibus, right? And I didn't know what this person actually looked like, even though I'd written him, because I'd stopped writing the series 3 or 4 years ago, and I never really ever had a cover of his face, right? So it was the narrator, Jeff Hayes. I'm like, Jeff, you channel this character. What does he look like? And he's like, well, he looks like these actors. And so we came up with the same artist did this, like used Jeff's pictures to then do this. And so it was a point of like using another artist, the narrator, like who are you channeling? Who are you, envisioning when you're doing this to then help me get the best, art I can. So.
Amazing. See, this is why I like your emails. So Davis, I know we already mentioned that you are a doctor. That's why I do this. What has being a doctor and going through medical school helped with your writing? Does it give you discipline, help you with fight scenes?
Yeah, I guess so. So getting through med school, it's more of a grind than it is an intellectual sort of thing. It's just you're putting all your deferring gratification for years, and then you got to pay med school loans, so that's even further. Then you got residency and fellowship. So you do have to have a certain amount of discipline, and then also I get pissed off if I don't get things the way I want them to be. So it makes me able to focus a little bit because that anger sort of channels correctly. So from that perspective, my sons, they're 21 and 19, they're always they're not amazed by me at all because they actually think it's kind of sad that I'm a nerd. But then you look at them and you're like, you sure you're not a nerd? But anyway, they always wonder, how do you go to work and do all that and come back and write? And it's just a habit that I've sort of built. But as far as knowledge is concerned, the kind of medicine I practice isn't interventional or traumatic. It's mostly preventing long-term illnesses. And then knowing what happens with those long-term illnesses if they aren't cared for correctly. And so I don't lean on that too much because it feels kind of like a vampire, but at least I know what can happen with those kind of things. So it does filter in, just it's not always about blood and guts though.
Tell that to Harmon's cover artist.
This cover artist is amazing. And 75 bucks is jaw-dropping.
That's
Impressive. Well, I don't like 40 of them, but there are 35 that I wrote.
So when you write that, you can hate something.
Yeah, you can hate John if you wrote it.
And Robert, to you, you are Mr. DragonCon. I think you've been on, what, like 10 panels. Thanks for finding time for us
Oh, no,
today.
you can do it.
And
No way.
No. No, I haven't had any bourbon hit this morning. That's the problem.
so you talked a little bit earlier about, how the fans, impact your writing and into your books, but how does community building that you do involve your career?
Yeah, I think David said it best, is that I still find it strange and just surreal, the whole fan concept. And the first year I've been coming to DragonCon for about 10 years, and the first year that they invited me as a pro, I was like, why? And then the first year I saw someone cosplaying as a character in one of my books, that was even more strange. But being able to interact with folks and having that feedback really, I think it influences the work. I mean, there was even a chapter in one book where very meta, where the main character saw himself being cosplayed at DragonCon. So and that was my little homage to everybody going, I don't even know why I'm here, but this is so great, thank you guys. But yeah, it's just, it's a fantastic community, and it's been great to be part of it.
So we reached out to a guest questioner who is Chris McGrath, who is also a cover artist, and he had a couple of questions for Jim and Craig, whose covers he most recently did. And Jim, for you, he says, I've always wondered what his favorite image of Harry is that I've done for him. Me personally, the law is probably his favorite. I guess my second question would be, when is the next cover coming?
H.E. Chris. The law was good because I really liked Dresden's hair on that cover. I mean, that's kind of like a petty way to say it, but it looked like Gandalf's hair in that one scene where his hair was different when he gets to Gondor, and his hair is different in that than it is in all the other scenes in the book. And it's like, ooh, that looks good. And I noticed that, and then when I saw Dresden on the cover, I was like, ooh, that looks good. Oh, it's the same hair. I like that. And I've broken ground on the next Dresden book. So I mean, the first chapter's done, and I'm plugging along to the next one. I'm kind of setting the steampunk aside for a bit, and I need to get the next Dresden book done on account of I got a house and I need the money. So that's very motivational. I like that. But yeah, that's about it. Chris is such a great guy. I mean, he does such amazing art, and basically that's the part where Anne is not very easygoing. She'll be like, "Here's the art. It's wonderful, isn't it?" Yes, ma'am. That's great.
And Craig, to you. So just for context, previously Craig's X-Files series is very military sci-fi, spaceships, space. Yeah. And for Convergence, we wanted to do, it was going to have a very different look. It's contemporary fantasy. It's not set in space. So we approached Chris McGrath to do the cover of that book. And he says he's curious as to why you chose Westchester, New York for the location of the book. And I think that came from the original brief.
I know nothing about that.
Okay, so it must be...
You've seen my museum quality sketch, which really should have been the cover we published. I basically said it's got to have a cute dog and a hot guy. And all the ladies at Podium confirmed he is a hot guy. So,
yes.
Yeah.
We had a committee.
We
judged him to be hot.
Thrilled with that. And he's not wearing a hat. So.
I don't know. There is actually the the cover of the lore is like in your little pamphlet we handed out, but the hat is hanging on the wall.
Yes.
On the lore cover.
Oh,
So we made sure it was in
The hilarious bit was when I wrote the steampunk, and I've got this essentially a British naval captain who would never be caught dead outside of his cabin without his hat. And so after years of having Dresden in the hat, then I got the steampunk cover, and there he's standing there boldly bareheaded.
Yeah.
I'm like, Chris! He's like, okay, and he went and added a hat under his arm. It's fine. That'll do.
That's great. So, lightning round, how much time do we have? Is this good? I want to make sure.
You have, what? 20 minutes.
Okay, good. So, just amongst you, what do you see as the benefit of being an indie? We are amongst indies, and the independent way, from my perspective, is great. What do you guys?
So I talked to a lot of people about this before. On the new series Convergence, I talked with Tor and several other trad clubs, and it just did not work out. They wanted to cut the book from 180,000 words to 120. They wanted the ebook to be priced higher than the print. They wanted 1 book a year. I want 2 books a year. And they said it absolutely has to go to Macmillan Audio. And Macmillan could not guarantee R.C. Gray, which is the non-starter. I mean, for me, it just doesn't work, traditional publishing. It's too focused still on how much, that's fine, how much space will take up in a bookstore. Yeah. So I just, my wife knows I did a control freak.
Most authors are when it comes to their stuff,
Yeah, and I just, somebody telling me, do this, don't do that, would not work.
I'm the same way. I want to write what I want to write, and I don't want an editor telling me cut this scene out or whatever. The editor may not be right, and ultimately, somebody said you got to write what's in your heart and what's in your passion. And I don't know whether a traditional publishing house would give me the freedom to write what's in my heart and what's in my passion. I write big books. I mean, the last 4 books I've written were 200,000 words. I don't think that a traditional publishing house would give me that kind of space to write the story that I want to write as a, with the sales that I have, they'd not look at it correctly. And they'd say, no, you're not worth that many words, or whatever they would say. So I just like to do what I want to do. And I don't want
They
to
said that to me.
Well,
the East Dogs Battleground was originally 1 book.
really? Yeah. I never bothered really even trying to get a traditionally publishing contract because I just knew who I am. I'm ornery and I like to do things my way. And so I do things my way.
But it's worked for Jim.
Well,
Traditional publishing's worked for you.
we did, yeah.
But you're the big dog.
I didn't start off that way. Traditional publishing worked out for me mainly because I spend so much time inside my own head. I really have none for business. Kevin Anderson invites me to Superstars, which is a writing conference in Colorado Springs, and they spend 1 day talking about craft and then 2 days talking about business, and I've just got nothing to say on those 2 days. Because I'll just be like, what do you think, Jim? Focus on your craft. And that is always kind of what you've been there. I mean, But the great part about traditional publishing is you don't have to worry about a lot of things because there's a corporation doing it. The bad part about doing traditional publishing is you have to worry about a lot of things because there's a corporation doing it. But it's less work. So it appeals to the laziness in me, I suppose. It worked out for me, but it's not the path for everyone. And so, we'll see what happens. My son is going traditional publishing, so we'll see what happens with him.
I'm really ebook centric, and that's mostly because I travel a lot. And when I first self-published in 2011, I had then moved to Asia for 5 years, and so carrying around books is not ideal. Like having an electronic reader and being able to read and download that way. And a lot of the things that traditional publishers do undermine their own success versus indie publishers. So meaning that if you're pricing the ebook higher than the print book to thwart people from buying the ebook, they're going to buy my $4.99 ebook, if that makes sense. And so it's kind of the things that they do are really interesting in a way because it helps me, although I'm not directly benefiting from being able to go to Barnes and Nobles and see my stuff. it kind of fits what I do right now because of like my interest in traveling and being able to read where I want to. And that's why, web serials are becoming so big as well, because so many people are traveling and moving around, and same with audiobooks, because again, we're always on the move and we can listen to audiobooks while we're doing it.
So kind of like with Craig, I write my books audio first, so there's a lot less of the named descriptors and so forth. And in my experiences with the tribe publishers hasn't been super awesome either, for a lot of the reasons that Craig mentioned. I had a conversation with Victoria like, I don't know, 3 months ago, and I said, yeah, it's going to be close to 200,000 words. And she's like, well, they said in the contract it was 170, and that's more. I'm like, I'm not good at math. And like, but not much more. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's like a partner conversation, right? Because the story needed those extra, how much? 20 minutes? But however many.
4 hours.
Yeah. So it needed that extra 4 hours. And it was just a quick conversation. And then I made a commitment not to let it go, just drag on and get further. The other piece of it is that I go through an alpha process where I have people that I really trust, that I've known for forever, and I do reads to them, horrible reads, I never in terms of narrating, because they tell me how bad a narrator I am. And then they rip it, right? So they are ruthless, they're sadists. I don't name them in the front book, although I mentioned them. And that I don't want an editor who doesn't know me and doesn't know where I'm going. And then I have beta people doing something similar. So I don't want someone going, well, this needs to come out, and then I have to go with what they said, because I'm kind of a serf. So you give up some things, like Jim mentioned, you have to do a lot of extra stuff. But I think from my perspective, it's really worth it, because it's your craft and it's what you want to do.
You look like you're on the verge.
No, I was just thinking that they're smarter than me.
Totally not true.
I've got a lightning round, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questions. So the lightning round is, if you could be portaled into any author's world, not your own, where would you go and why?
Not the Dresden verse. Chicago's becoming a apocalypse, and the only good food is Max cheese sticks. So, probably Harry Potter, because as a Muggle, I wouldn't know of all these terrible things happening.
That'd be good.
Just
eat the stinky balls or whatever.
Yeah,
Sweets.
yeah.
I have a non-fiction and fiction answer. The fiction answer, it would be World of Change, which is a lit RPG by Lars Mackmuller, and the reason is because I was thinking like, yeah, maybe Dungeon Crawler Carl or something, but like, no, I do not want to be in a situation like any of these books, right? In World of Change, the main character is a bard, so I could just be a writer, but still have maybe go on an adventure every now and then. So it'd be like my life right now, basically. Now, as for nonfiction, I thought about this because I'm a really big fan of Craig Childs, who writes like Southwestern creative nonfiction. So he does like things like, okay, I'm going to go to Chaco Canyon and walk along the old routes that were used and for 20 or 30 days. I would never want to do that. So I read his books to get like inspiration for Cowboy Necromancer. I've read like 4 or 5 of them. I would portal to one of his books and just do that for like a day with him, and then be back by nighttime to watch movies with my wife. So.
Narnia. I want to hang out with Tolkien animals.
I would say 2. One of them is Robert Heinlein's Time Enough for Love universe. So I would like to be cruising on the Gate Deceiver through 666 multiverses. That would be super cool. And the other one, which I don't know if anybody's heard of, is World of Tears by Francis Jose Farmer. I would look, gosh, you get to be young, your hair, everything's good, everybody's beautiful, and no one wears clothes. It's awesome.
Also Robert Heinlein.
As well, yeah. So those 2.
That's a tough one. All these worlds have so much violence, and I'm kind of allergic to that sort of thing.
Well, you could be a doctor there.
I wouldn't be a very good
Dr.
one.
Tumnus.
I could diagnose your thyroid problem. If you got an amputated leg, you're on your own. So I'd probably want to go somewhere really peaceful, and so I would probably want to go to the land, but not when Lord Fowl's awake, like in those millennia when he's asleep. and the world is nice and peaceful, and I die before he wakes up, that would be ideal. So something like that would be perfect.
See, that would have been like the one world I wouldn't have wanted to go to.
Yeah, but this is when Lord falls asleep and nothing's going on. It's just like slow and easy.
Nothing's going on at my house.
Yeah.
But wow, okay.
To each his own.
Trees or in the stone?
Probably the trees. I would love to go clambering through some trees like that, you know? The stone would be fine too, but
Clambering is a great verb.
that is a
To
great
clamber?
word. Yeah, to clamber.
I like I had clambered.
They pushed my vocabulary in this panel. I have to pretend to know what I'm doing.
All right, so we've got audience questions. This gentleman in the back.
Okay. I will use
Sister's getting her workout.
Here, go. I'll hold it.
Okay. This question is for Cooper. Your cover designs are fantastic and look as good as any of the trad pub stuff on the wall behind you. Who does your cover design layout?
That would be Sean. His name is Sean King. So Sean King does a lot. Yeah, Sean King does a lot of indie authors' designs, and he does everything from Wandering In to, I mean, everything. So he has a long wait list, but usually with him, because of his wait list, I will get the font done 6 or 7 months in advance. So I'm never up to the wire, because I have seen authors that are like, crap, I have to publish this tomorrow, and I still don't have font, and so I'm gonna wing it, and that's not my style. So he did all of these. He did War Priest, Cover Necromancer, Feedback Loop. He did Pilgrim as well, and he's really good at what he does. That's a really cool skill.
If you want,
I'll hold it.
okay. I would love to know what author or book series inspired you as a younger person to be a writer, or as a writer looking back, you realize this was the book series or the author that you really drawn for inspiration. Maybe not for specific storylines, but just in general, as what inspired you to love writing and want to be a writer.
For me, it was Tolkien first. It was the Belgariad second.
Oh my God.
My favorite was Riddle Master of Head, and then Wheel of Time. So this series was actually sort of my love letter to Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings. But reading those books, yeah, those were my inspirations to wanting to become a writer.
Mine was Number of the Beast by Robert Heinlein. And yeah, if you could do 6-dimensional algebra, I figured at the time I could get through 2-dimensional algebra barely in high school.
You said you weren't good at math.
I'm not. That's why I barely got through. So I put love letters to Robert Heinlein fans in each of my books. They're just hidden in there somewhere.
You're not made it that hard.
That's because you see them. You know them. That's the answer to everything.
For me, there were two authors who were majorly inspirational to my writing. One was Margaret Weiss, who came into my high school library and gave a talk in Independence, Missouri, because she was also from Independence, and Harry Truman Library and Harry Truman High School, and gave a talk about being a writer. And I thought, oh my gosh, there's somebody from my town who did this. Maybe this is possible. And I sort of sat on that for a while until I read the second series of the Belgariad. I think it was called the Malorian.
It was the Malorian.
And I was so disappointed in it that I was like, oh my God, I could have done better than this. I was complaining. I said, I could have done better than this myself. And my friend says, I'm seeing an awful lot of mouth flapping over there. I said, you're right. Maybe I better start writing. And I wrote one of my first terrible novels. So.
Mine would. So when I was younger, I was really into comic books, and it kind of, in a way, shapes my indie career, because I was really into Image Comics and like the separation of like those artists that went from Marvel to do their own thing. So Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. So Spawn has been a big influence on me. And I even did my own comic when I was like 9 or 10 with the neighborhood kid, helping with the text and drawing all the art. And then my mom found it, and of course, if you remember Spawn, like the women were quite like, yeah. So I was doing this, and my mom's like, "What are you drawing?" And I'm, like, I'm working on a comic book, okay? You know, like, I'm an artist over here, okay? So I would say comic books, and specifically that.
So I had a positive influence is Lord of the Rings. I actually started reading that before I knew The Hobbit existed, so I was really confused. Went back with it. A negative influence is we were on vacation. I bought a book in an airport bookstore. It was the worst book I've ever finished. And I was like, this has got to get better. It got worse. And I literally was sitting on the beach in Antigua. I'm like, over my shoulder, if that crap can get published, I can get published. My wife says, do it.
What's the name of the book?
And yeah, no. I'm a fan of this author. He said it wasn't one of his best books. Yeah, it was just really awful. But I'm saying, if that can get published, something I write equally awful can get published. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Was it you?
He was first.
We had some other question.
All right, so when you write your first book or your first series that's getting narrated, like what's the process of picking your narrator? Because like the narrator like really draws you in. I mean, so it's like Nick Fidel and Arthur Bray. I love those guys and listening to them. Like I always like to look audiobooks up before the narrator. So just out curious, like how do you pick that?
So for me, I'm a huge fan of David Wind. So I love Pat's work. He writes lyrical. It's almost like poetry to me. And so Nick did his U.S. work for David Wind. There's another gentleman that did the UK version. So I just wrote to him and I was like, hey, are you interested in doing this book? Gave him an abstract. And he's like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And that was it. But it was because I loved his performance in that book.
I mean, as a publisher, we hear from authors, all the time. We work with a lot of authors where we're acquiring their work, and we have a casting team who does pretty much what you just described. Looks at the book, understands what the characters are, and then goes out, into the narrator world and finds the person who's going to best, embody. It's like a film casting director. It's like, if you're a writer, would you cast your own movie? Well, some people might, but often it's great to use a casting director. So as a publisher, that's what we do.
So for me, it's kind of weird, my publishing career, because if I knew then what I know now, I'd have done things a lot differently. But I just kind of stumbled and bumbled and fumbled my way to finding Nick Fidel. So I published my first 2 books, and a friend of mine had just done his own audiobook, and so he said, you should do that. That's a great way to find new readers. So stupid me, I was like, okay. And so basically I just listened to narrators, and I was like, I like his voice. That was Nick. And I thought, oh, and he did Name of the Wind, and I like that book, and that's popular, so let me ask him. So I cold emailed him, and I was like, hey Nick, can you narrate my book? And he messaged me back, and we did 3 books together on our own, and then Audible Studios did my second series with him, and then Podium did the next series with him, and then last year, I don't even know how I ended up calling Travis Baldry, but I ended up Zooming with him and asked him to come to DragCon. I was like, it's a great time, you should come. And so, he shows up, and I was like, but I've got this story idea, would you want to? He's like, sure. And at the time, it was supposed to be a science fantasy series that was like 100,000 words. And it turned out to be a fantasy series based on some other things that turned out to be 200,000 words, which I was just like, I'll do it. And so I kind of got lucky that way because it wasn't planned at all.
All right, we got 5 minutes. There was a question over here.
Still staying on the audiobooks narrator part. As a listener and reader, it's extremely frustrating when you switch narrators like partway through a series, and because they pronounce names differently, they pronounce words differently. What are some reasons that, like, did the authors have any control of that, or what is the reasoning behind why you guys might do that? And what's your opinion on it? Because from the reader side, I know it can be extremely frustrating.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but life happens to narrators as well as to authors, and we try to avoid that at all costs. And in some cases, it means a big wait for a narrator to become available, and most times it's worth waiting, but sometimes a narrator will get busy with a movie, or get sick, or God forbid get COVID, or God forbid even worse, die in some cases. So that's why it happens. It's really something we take very seriously at Podium, and we try to keep, we manage expectations at the beginning because we do so much genre fiction that we're doing a lot of series. So when we engage with a narrator, we say, okay, this is likely to be 5 books, and they're going to be every 6 months or every year, and so that everybody going into it knows what is expected. And we have great relationships with our narrators, and usually things go according to plan.
Only to add to that, sometimes life gets in the way, and some authors like Michael Chatfield, his 10 Realms series, he switched narrators halfway through, and then he's been going back with having Neil Helligers do the first books. And so now new listeners start with Neil Helligers, and then they go to the old narrator, and then they go back to him because it's taking time to get it. But eventually, in the future, it'll all be the same, the same narrator. And sometimes his life works out that way. And so if they can correct it, it's also a really good thing.
For Jim, for narrating, is it Jotun or Jotun?
Oh, probably should be Jotun.
I've been yelling at the book.
Jotun Jotnar. Yeah.
I just had one error. Just one quick question for Jim. Can we have more of Harry playing the guitar in the future so it can give James an opportunity to sing in one of the audiobooks?
Okay. The fans, I'll have to tell him, look, man, the fans asked. I didn't want to do this.
We have a recording, so you have backup on that.
Little?
Yeah, we'll have to have a song where the lyrics include little, you're right. Maybe he can sing it. Some people are like that. They can't say it, but they can sing it.
Only one way to find out.
1 minute. 1 minute, one question.
Okay.
With one quick answer. No.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Everybody's raising their hand.
Harmon has goodies to give away down there. Robert, did you have some goodies?
Yep, I have 3 handmade carvings from someone that loved the series, and I promised that I would give them away at DragonCon, so the first 3 people come up, and I will give them to you.
And I'm giving Cowboy Necromancer away too. Tonight I'm on the sci-fi, intimacy and sci-fi panel, and I'll give away another. I have 3 books left, so I want at least to be able to display them. So I'll give this one away, and I'll give the other one away tonight. And then one more on Monday. Please
Amazing.
come.
Thanks. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming.